Welcome, everyone, to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I want to welcome you all here today. First, we want to thank our sponsors, the San Antonio Handweavers Guild. Thank you so much. They're one of our angel guilds. They've sponsored several episodes of Textiles and Tea. Thank you, San Antonio. We love you guys. Appreciate it. We will have questions at the end of this session. Last word 15 minutes or so, we'll do questions. So please put your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat. Keep those comments going in chat. We love those, but I can't always see the question if they're in there. We want to thank our person who's coming to join us today, Robin Kang. Robin is an artist and a weaver that's deeply engaged in the intersection of ancient spiritual lineages and contemporary digital practices. An interesting combination. We're going to talk more about that. Working with a digitally operated jacquard hand loom, she creates weavings that merge mythic symbolism, computer-related imagery, and digital mark making. This blend of textiles and electronic references invites dialogue on bridging traditional craft with modern innovation, exploring the connections between textiles, symbols, language, and memory. Robin has studied under master weavers from Mayan, from Kichwa, and Scandinavian traditions. She's initiated into the Amazonian Shipobo lineage. She holds an MFA from the School of Art of Institute of Chicago and is a recipient of the 2017 New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship in Craft and Sculpture. And we are so excited to have Robin here today. Hey, Robin. Uh-oh.
Oh,
Come join us. There she is.
okay. Hi.
Hey, Robin.
Hi.
It's so good to have you here. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Good. So, important question. What is your favorite tea?
Well, this is a difficult choice for me because I'm fond of a lot of different plants and herbs and actually even make my own tea combinations and
Oh,
tinctures.
really?
Yeah. So, but I'm gonna choose a plant that I'm really loving lately. That is the magical plant Blue Lotus. And it is a high vibrational plant that comes from Egypt. And it has relaxing, stress relieving qualities and also aids in a heightened intuition. And it's even featured in some like Egyptian hieroglyphs. So I recommend trying it.
And it's Blue Lotus?
Blue Lotus. Uh-huh.
Oh, that's a new one. I'm going to check that out. Thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
sure.
So it's interesting. So many of our guests have these interesting paths to where they are now, and you were one of them. You were one of them, because you didn't start out in fiber, and then you did when you went to the School of Art Chicago, the Art Institute, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what was that like to shift gears? Was that exciting, scary? How did it feel
Um,
to do that?
well, I mean, having the blessed opportunity to explore your art in a graduate program is so exciting and kind of like a creative dream come true. So that really it was a very exciting time in my creative process. And one of the aspects that I really love about specifically the graduate program at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago is that it's interdisciplinary in nature. So that means while I initially was part of the print media department there, and I had a background in digital photography and an interest in kind of digital graphics and design that were kind of more connected to technological innovations that were exploding in the 1980s and the 90s that were a dominant influence on my generation. Even though I came with all of that experience to the program, I was still encouraged to pursue whatever media directions were calling me creatively while I was there. And so that allowed for an opportunity for me to take some floor loom weaving classes within the fiber department. And then also I had access to this um, the exciting digital loom, the TC2 that they had. And I really fell in love with the computational process of weaving. and and then specifically the tool of the TC2 because it really married my skills of digital design with interests that I had from where I grew up in handmade crafts. I grew up in Texas, and so naturally had some kind of influence from the Southwest, from Mexican artisans and a lot of Southwestern traditions. So I feel like that was where kind of those two worlds came together for me.
And I think I've asked you this before, but and I want to make sure I get this correct. You were in school in Kansas? No, Texas.
Originally Texas,
Texas.
undergrad, yeah.
And then you decided to do graduate work at Chicago. Did you know going to Chicago you were going to do fiber, or did that come later?
No, that came in the process while I was there. That's why I was singing the praises of the interdisciplinary
Yeah.
aspect because I was able to kind of find my creative media in a sense and not be kind of confined to whatever how I showed up, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the TC2, and for folks who don't know what a TC2 is, would you explain briefly what the TC2 loom is? Because we're going to
Sure.
talk more about that.
Sure. Yes. So the TC2 loom or the thread controller 2 is what that's TC stands for. It's a digital jacquard loom that is designed for hand weavers. It is computer controlled loom that uses software to generate complex weaving patterns and can potentially include multiple weave structures within the same cloth. This allows for intricate designs that would be difficult or impossible to achieve on a traditional hand loom. But while the loom's operation is still computer controlled, it retains a manual shuttle feature. So that gives the weaver direct control over the pass of the weft yarn with a traditional boat shuttle and bobbin. So all that part is done completely by hand. So it really bridges the gap between digital design and hand weaving. And that offers a unique combination between precision, control, but also some creative freedom.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of combining components of what would be found in contemporary digital looms that are in use for mass production in mills, but those are completely automated in all aspects. So it combines the digital design aspect of those with hand weaving and manual capabilities. So that was a lot to understand to wrap around, but it's kind of like a hybrid loom in a way between these two. And this particular loom was really fascinating for me conceptually as a tool for art making because it's related to the first binary operated machine, which the very first jacquard loom was the first machine to use punch cards. So it has this direct relationship to our idea of binary information systems that later would be developed into our modern computers. And so this kind of loom history as a subject matter um, is seemed an exciting way to create artwork for me to about the history of weaving and memory and its connection to the computer and the digital. So a lot of my work combines symbolism of computer-related imagery and digital mark making.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for people to understand is with the TC2, you can pick up individual threads, right? It's not like on a harness or a shaft where if one goes up, they all go up. You can do one by one by one, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Well, all jacquard looms do this. That's what the
right.
punch card was what created this idea of every thread could lift individually on each line of pixels, we'll call them, because of its placement within the punch card. And so now rather than having thousands of punch cards streamed up in kind of like a cascading waterfall as the original ones were. That all of that is digital. And so this each heddle lifts individually according to the pixels of the line of in the file, which basically is kind of a low resolution. It's a TIFF file. It's either a black or white. It's either the thread lifts or it stays down. So it's kind of actually not that complex of technology compared to what we see on our screens usually that have a variety of colors and things like that. So
So my next question is really, all weavers in the world will appreciate this next question because you once a year, you take about a month, right? And you put on a 100-yard long warp. Yes, folks, 100 yards long. I whine about 8 yards. So the images that we have right now, it shows, look at this warp. Oh my gosh. So it takes forever. So would you talk some more about this procedure of putting on this warp?
sure. So I've often am asked when people look at my art and my weavings, how long does it take you to make one of your weavings? And it's really complicated to answer that because not only does it take the time to design and hand weave each piece, but there is the process of putting the warp on the loom. And because this loom is so large in scale and so many threads, that is just a labor-intensive process that I don't want to have to do every few yards for each piece. So to streamline that, I try to consolidate this to a month-long endeavor that happens only once a year. So, it involves me using a large warping wheel where I'm winding the 100 yards of mercerized cotton in bundles, and then I place them on kind of measured out on the loom's warp beam. And then I use this kind of method involving, I'm using water bottles as weights actually to hold tension. And then it's actually computer automated. The warp beam winds with a foot pedal kind of slowly. And so I kind of slowly make sure nothing's getting tangled while it's winding. And then when it reaches like a tight tie on the warp, okay, then I stop everything and cut it and kind of keep things going. So, but then after, what these photos don't show is after it's finally wound on, there is another stage of tying knots from the old warp to the new warp. So my current configuration of my loom, which is the widest size that they create this loom, it's 4 modules wide, and then I have 4 modules deep. So there's 3,520 threads. And there is, it's set at 60 inch per inch is my kind of configuration currently, and that's what I like. So I don't want to have to redo my threading on this loom. It's bananas for 3,000 yeah, petals to thread. I don't want to have to do that. So I tie the knots and then pull them through. But still, tying 3,520 knots is no small feat. So actually this just was completed last month. So phew,
Ready to go.
exciting. Yeah, and it's worth it because then once I do that, then I can just weave lots of big projects back to back for the rest of the year and really just enjoy the creative weaving process.
Well, I was thinking about how you have to choose colors, whatever, and that's it for the year, right? So if you use a white warp, then you've got to design with the white warp. If you use black warp, whatever. So, and I was thinking, is it a challenge to design knowing that your warp is going to be the same color? There's nothing that you can do about it. And we've got a couple of images that show a piece with a black warp and a piece with a white warp. There you go. So can you talk some about the designing, knowing your warp is a certain color and that's it?
Sure. I mean, well, describing the process that I just described, I really feel like, yeah, it's worth it for me to have to have the warp wound on. I know there's definitely techniques. I could paint the warp now that I've been using white, that's an option still. But actually there's so many variables in the weaving process using this loom, and then I incorporate a lot of different variables and colors with my weft yarns. So I really have never been bored with with having one color. I still have lots to explore. So it's working for me, and for the, and in a way, I'm often creating works for art exhibitions. So I want them to have like a unified feel in the room. So kind of having all the same color warp really also helps everything have a matching base. And I guess for many years I used the black warp because I really liked the way the weft colors would pop
Mm.
on the black warp. And then also this kind of idea of the black screen, the void of the screen of a digital screen was also a good for the subject matter of the imagery that I was weaving. But however, in 2020, I decided I wanted to switch to a white warp, and I have really been enjoying the lighter feel that it's giving my newer work, and kind of a more spiritual, organic themes that have been influencing those pieces. It feels resonant with that. And so, yeah, I feel like maybe these two pieces are examples of both of those.
Well, they're beautiful pieces, absolutely gorgeous pieces, and we're going to talk some more about those. But one thing I do want to talk about is you've mentioned symbolism a couple of times, and symbolism does play a large role in your weaving. Um, and and I was curious about the color, the meanings in the color. Do you use color with meaning? Do you choose a color saying red means this or black means that or this kind of difference? Um, is there meaning there for you too?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I guess yeah, this is another, both of these, the past two slides have been great examples of kind of two different bodies of work, or like an older body of work and the newer. For instance, I think both of them, the one on the right that had the black warp, I'm using a little bit of black in both of them, so it's kind of hard to distinguish that. But the the black warp, those, a lot of that work was really involving references to computer hardware and circuitry, digital glitches, and some of my more recent works are also incorporating some kind of organic shapes that are inspired by plant forms. So the works with the black warp, I was really inspired by integrated circuits, and I was looking a lot at images of integrated circuits, especially from the 1970s, and kind of placing those forms in the realm of geometric abstract painting, and thinking about those shapes in that canon. And during that time, I was also developing some style in the materials and colors that I was using, where I was using a lot of metallic yarns to kind of mimic the solder lines that would be found in some type of printed circuit or computer part, and then color gradients that kind of felt reminiscent to graphics on a digital screen. And then the work on the left here is one of the newer pieces that was um, inspired on my time reflecting on some time I spent in the Amazon rainforest, where I was studying indigenous textile techniques and also plant medicine. So the symbols and the shapes started, they still retain, I think, some element of everything that came before, but now there's also a kind of bioelectric um, kind of influence of that bioelectric activity that I saw in the rainforest and the plants and the insects. I think the screen, or the frame prior to this, had one that was a little bit kind of inspired by maybe like a butterfly um,
Mhm.
circuit or vibration. And yeah, there's also maybe slight elements, references to Art Nouveau or Deco textiles, where in the lineage of textile history, we see references to plants. And also kind of in addition to the metallic yarns that I was using, I found this really amazing material that's an iridescent lurex yarn that kind of sparkles and changes color in the lighting. And so it's hard to see. It's really incredibly hard to photograph. It kind of just appears often as like a gray or like an off-white in the still photographs. But in real life, they kind of have a phosphorescent kind of magic quality that for me really evoked the energy that I experienced in the rainforest.
Well, you mentioned glitches. So could you talk some about, you put glitches in your weaving. And so can you talk some about what you mean by those and maybe discuss the glitches in these works?
Sure. So, I guess by the term glitch, um, that would be maybe a temporary malfunction or error or some kind of irregularity
Hmm.
that I'm sure we have all experienced with our relationship with technology. And while I was a grad student at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, I had another really amazing opportunity to take some classes with artists that were a part of what was called like a glitch art movement. And they were employing technical and digital glitches intentionally in video and new media work. Um, that kind of produced really interesting aesthetics and were celebrating digital errors rather than being, frustrated by them like the rest of us. And there was also some type of commentary within what they were doing about breaking confining systems or maybe celebrating the imperfection of humanity in contrast to kind of a rapidly encompassing digital machine dominated culture. And so I really loved this as a concept. And with the Jacquard loom being the first binary operated machine and connected to the computer, it felt really fitting to also incorporate this. Plus, there is a struggle of working with any type of technology. Glitches just appear. Um, and so I started incorporating this, celebrating the errors when they happened, but also sometimes creating them, intentionally with wild salvages on my edges or leaving broken threads visible rather than cleaning them up, and or adding, dangling threads almost as line elements that could kind of create this aesthetic and celebrate it within the pieces. And so there's like a proof, even though I'm using this digital process, I really wanted proof that the artist hand was present in the
Mm.
making.
Well, I think I heard in another article that you were interviewed or you wrote that this is similar also to a Navajo concept. Or am I making that up?
Um, Yes, I can't fully speak to all the mysteries of their weaving techniques, but I do know that there is a technique within their lineage involving creating an intentional error at the end of the piece, or like what I think is called a spirit line that in my understanding involves it allows the creative spirit not to get contained within the piece, but to exit the piece so that you can make another piece with the same creative spirit, something in those lines. But yeah, so it does seem that there's a precedent, and I know a lot of like African textiles as well incorporate, variations of patterns, and there's uh yeah, this idea of the human error that creates something beautiful.
I love it when you find the same concepts in different cultures, you know, very
Absolutely.
union, it's like this world of concept and we all share it somewhere down the line, even in weaving. Um, there's a lot of movement in your work, and I loved how um, when you compare it, Um, it sometimes it's swishy like the one on the left. Sometimes it's very angular on the right. Is that something that was important for you when you're designing, or is that just an added benefit when you were done?
Um, no, I think there's some intentional uh yeah, elements to that. I'm making these with the intention of art making and art viewing, and I want the viewer's eye to roll around the entire piece, and so movement is always a great visual tool when it comes to that. So a combination of shapes and composition kind of achieve this. Also, I think the gradients help create movement with color. And then also maybe some of the pieces that were kind of in the glitch category. I'm using digital mark making tools in a Photoshop where like I'm using pen tool gestures and spray brush kind of actions as mark making, as you would be kind of drawing in this digital format. And then because of the nature of this loom, I'm able to actually weave those marks. And so I think there's some gesture involved with that. And then the idea of the solder line in some early computer pieces is also almost like a drawing. It's a
Oh.
gesture that is kind of linking together different parts of the circuit. So all of that kind of thinking about that as movement, and then perhaps there's even like a physical movement in the making because
Yeah.
the TC2 you stand up when you're weaving, and my loom is around 60 inches wide. So I kind of have to do like a little side to side shuffle when I'm throwing my shuttle back and forth with my weft yarns. So there is even like a physical movement in the making, and then you stomp on the foot pedal. So, it's yeah, I think movement is definitely a part of the process too. Mm.
Um, I I understand in the designing for this kind of work, um, it's done ahead of time. You're on your computer, you're coming up with your design, especially with the warp, I think. And then, but with the weft, you have a little bit more spontaneity, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So do you
So,
do some of that kind of designing as you go as far as with the weft?
um, that's definitely possible with this loom. Usually part of my process involves, uh, like a planned out design that I work on usually in Photoshop actually, because that's where a lot of my skill set is. And then I add weave structures into the shapes of the design that I'm working on. And then I usually kind of work through a couple different color palette options within my shapes, and and then I do some tests on the loom, and I test little small 1-inch strips, and I see, okay, what do these colors look like together? And what do these different materials look like? And then when it comes time to weave the actual piece, and I've made those decisions, I kind of collect all the different yarns that I have that fit those color palettes. So I have a wide range of materials, of some cotton, some you know, synthetic, some thick, some thin, all kinds. And so then I'm just going for texture at this stage, and really weaving a bunch of different materials, and that part is improvisational and fun. And then this is also kind of when that um the glitch element can really take shape, because things happen. A thread might break, or maybe I notice, oh, this material doesn't look as good as I thought it did. But maybe if I throw a little bit of, even though I'm doing blues, if I use this kind of greenish color every once in a while, it adds a nice texture. So that part for me is my kind of improvisation.
And you were talking earlier about how the jacquard loom, this TC2, is there's kind of a love-hate relationship between computer involved weaving and non-computer involved weaving, I think, in the weaving world, which is kind of ironic because um, it's computers and weaving have been together forever. It's like weaving is the mother of computers. So, but sometimes people believe that any kind of computer involved weaving is not really weaving, or at least not hand weaving. So, what's your thought on that?
Well, in some sense, they're correct. In industrial mills, where they have automated versions of jacquard looms, and they are the purpose of these mills are designed for rapid production. There is a few technicians that are there helping set the threads up and programming the files and turning the machines off and on. I've actually had the opportunity to work or to collaborate with a mill in the Netherlands, so I got this experience firsthand. And it's still, it's still just not as simple as you push the button. There's still some technical craft, a lot of technical craft involved, actually. But and I think there's often a misconception that I am weaving with that tool when someone hears the word jacquard,
Oh, mhm.
and that is definitely not the same type of jacquard loom that the TC2 is, because as I described it before, it really has this whole hand operated element where maybe I'm kind of using the best of the computer aided design aspect, that allows me to lift my heddles individually and do complex designs. But I have the creative freedom that comes with throwing each, you know, uh, shuttle by hand, and also the labor that comes with that too. There's I spend a lot more hours weaving than you would in an industrial mill to create the same amount of yardage. So, there is a give and take, but what I experience is the tension between the hand and the computer that we find frustrating. That struggle is definitely real, but it's also maybe one of the reasons why I wanted to embrace this idea of the glitch and this kind of the battle between man and machine as part of the conversation creatively about our relationship with humanity and technology. So that it all is part of why I'm choosing to make art with this type of material and this type of loom. And so yeah, I think it's in a way it's an important conversation to have, but I think there's often a misconception for sure.
Well, I think it's interesting because especially some of the images that we've looked at, is that it is very sensory for you because you are throwing the shuttle, especially if you're adding things to the warp, I mean, the weft, the extra material and everything. So, do you feel like it has that sensory component for you? And is that important?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think perhaps because I'm working with a computer aided loom, I want to push back on that precision, the precision of technology a little bit. And so I'm aiming for more lush textures in my
Mm.
cloths and some kind of shiny materials that a lot of the materials that I use with my weavings would never be allowed in the industrial mills because they'll break too easily and they'll gunk up the machine
Oh, yeah.
and things like that. So I'm intentionally using materials that that would not be allowed on those automated looms. And also yeah, it's creating a texture. I know sometimes some of my pieces I'll even use unconventional materials like a gift wrapping ribbon or chunks of wool batting that have been like a big chunk of it, or even plastic bags from my lunch at the local bodega where and that happened to be turquoise or blue or fit the color palette of whatever I was working on. So I'll actually by hand insert them into, just a small portion of the weft as I'm going. so that it kind of just creates like a weird little lump in the weaving, that just in the end becomes like a funky texture that, so I like this kind of push and pull where the viewer is like, okay, well, something here is very technology oriented, but yet all these textures and this, what is this weird material here and there? And that kind of draws you in. And it also, again, makes the artist hand present in the piece. So that would not be able to be replicated by a machine. If it was created by a machine, all that would be pristinely perfect, all the same, one color. And so I'm pushing back on that with my process with these materials. And so that's kind of part of the dialogue.
Well, one of the things that I was just so struck by is that you visited a history, I mean, a computer history museum, right? I didn't even know if there was such an animal. I guess there should be though. But you looked at old computers at this museum, and but you've also traveled um, around the world to more diverse cultures. Where it's the Mayans or Peru or wherever you're going, just to see these different cultures. So it's an interesting juxtaposition of old and new. How do you incorporate that together?
Well, sure. Well, weaving is essentially an ancient technology. It's global, it's binary, yet it's complex. It's about storing information and memory. And so, in a lot of ways, these two things are actually more similar than they seem. And often, in some ways, I kind of feel like we're still catching up to the past. Um, like many ancient weavings that I've studied in Peru were so highly complex that it would be difficult for me to recreate them with my technology. And that's quite mind-bending. And and also it seems that that many ancient cultures had skilled intelligence involving living more harmoniously with the natural cycles of the earth and the plants and the planetary bodies than we do in our contemporary cities. And so I'm really fascinated by the profound wisdom that was shared with me in some of my experiences with indigenous artisans, where, when I was deep in the rainforest, I saw a glimpse of kind of a electromagnetic ecosystem. Like the planet is really like a biological supercomputer. And and but I would never be able to tap into that experience in my Western lifestyle that is very separated from nature. So I really had to be like immersed in the forest to really feel that kind of buzz and see the way that everything was interconnected. And so yeah, so I really think that there is some kind of connecting threads to these there's still so much for me to explore in this area, which makes it rich soil for creating more artwork
Mhm.
and yeah, and more studies to continue.
Well, what is next for you?
Well, I'm currently making some more weavings. Showed, I just finished the new warp, so there's brand new canvas for some new pieces. I'm going to be in a couple exhibitions coming up. The first one opens March 9th. It's called Interlaced, and it's an exhibition of both computational and textile art, and it's on display in a really unique place. It's a Gothic revival church with arts and crafts painted interior in Cambridge in the UK.
Oh,
And so that'll be an interesting installation. It's a group exhibition. And then in May, I will be in an exhibition with Christian Helyeta Gallery in London. And then in August, I'll be in an exhibition High Dose at the Pit LA. And also, I'm partnering with a dear friend and also another textile aficionado from Asheville. She's the founder of a nonprofit called Weaving Rainbows. And we are in the process of organizing a trip to bring people to the Sacred Valley of Peru to study natural dyes with the Center of Traditional Textiles of Cusco. And so, if that pilgrimage calls your heart, get in touch with me. I can send you more information about that.
Now,
But
who's the other person?
her name's Lena, and she is the founder of Weaving Rainbows. Yeah.
So if they want more information, contact you or go to Weaving
Maybe just
Rainbows.
contact me and
Okay. That
yeah,
sounds fascinating. When is that again?
we're shooting for May. So
Of
some
this year?
mid-May. Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
road trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. And that part of Peru, the Quechua people that I've studied with is so magical. It's like tropical
Oh,
mountains with alpacas.
yes.
It's really beautiful.
That's one of those places I've never been, but I've never met anybody who went, yeah, it was okay. Everybody who goes is they all have different experiences, but they all seem to be so powerful in, changes in their lives and that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
if you're interested, here you go.
Yeah,
Check it out.
come join me.
There you go. Um, is it you work hard? I'm assuming you work hard to get your work into exhibits. I guess I was really struck, like you got three coming up, boom, boom, boom. Um, why is that important for you? I always hear different comments from different artists about why they do that.
Well, I mean, I guess the point of making the work is to show it, I
Hmm.
guess. And I definitely, consider myself an artist that makes work in the materials of fiber. So, I go to art openings of all different, like painting, sculpture, everything here in New York City where I live. And yeah, it seems like that's really a lot of the context where I like to situate the work and the concepts that I'm really playing with in the work too. So yeah, a lot of that involves just years of going to the things and meeting people and asking them to come to my studio and see what I'm working on and forming relationships and you know it's a process, a whole world.
Well, we have bunches of questions. So how about we take some?
Sure.
All right. One of them, and Mandy, I'm going to need your help on this one. People are talking about size, and I'm so bad about not asking the size. But I also think it's interesting because if I read this correctly, when you weave, I mean, you set that loom up for a year, right? That you don't just say, oh, from here to here is one piece. You really break up that warp into different size weavings, correct? So, Mandy, can you go back to any of the weavings so we can talk about size? Because people want to know what kind of size are we talking about in some of these pieces. So, if we can go back, maybe you can talk about is this because I don't even know how wide is your loom?
So it's around 60 inches
There you
wide.
go. Thanks.
So for instance, this is example of two different pieces, which you can kind of see a little bit with the size of the thread. So the piece on the left with the orange is the full width of my loom. So
Okay.
it is, I think it's something, the loom is about 60 inches wide. So sometimes what my actual weave width is more like in the 56 to 58 inch width size.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I do often before I commit to a piece that large, which is quite labor intensive to weave, I will work on some designs and I'll make several of them side by side and leaving space in between that to sew and cut them apart and then, sew them onto either another backed canvas and stretch them on stretchers like a painting or something or sew them in other ways so that they are finished pieces within themselves. But what I find is when I make the smaller pieces, that gives me a chance to figure out what works and what doesn't. So I if
Ah,
there's times where something, I don't know why, the structures don't line up and the piece doesn't really exactly turn out the way that it looked on the computer. And that actually happens more than you would think. And so the tests and the smaller pieces are really important to kind of work out some of those uh, little technical aspects of the piece. And even colors. Sometimes I realize like, oh, okay, that, maybe on a spool side by side, these two colors seemed like they were contrasty, but when I saw them together in the piece, they just kind of wash each other out. And so by doing the smaller pieces, I'm able to kind of figure that out. And then it also gives me variety in as far as to have artwork to show in different size spaces, because some spaces, have nice big walls, and other spaces or smaller group shows, I want to have a small piece that fits nicely, or maybe someone wants to collect a piece and they have room for a 16 by 20 spot on their wall, and that's the reality of sometimes the art world situation. So yeah, that gives me the variety. But basically I'm limited by the width because of my loom size, as we are with all looms, and then the length is basically as long as I want to make it.
And you have a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can make
I know,
some
I'm
big
obsessed
pieces.
about that. I just cannot imagine 100 yards. Thank you, Julia Konopasik. Hope I pronounced your name right. That was a good question. Thank you for asking about that. Um, Somebody wants to know, what kind of yarn do you like to use?
Well, all my warps are mercerized cotton, because I find that the threads break a little less, and it's nice to just, keep things moving. Um, but then, like I said before, I use a wide range of materials in my weft yarns. I have a bunch of spools of different metallics. A lot of them are the Lurex family. And then I I use a lot of chenille, actually, because
Really?
I find that they just create like a nice saturation, because it's a thicker, fluffier material than the cotton warp. And so sometimes if I really want to, like, especially with the white warp, it can kind of almost bleach the overall feeling. Even if I'm using a bright color, it kind of lightens it because you see the little bit of the white peeking through. But if I use a thicker material,
Oh,
that kind of blends over that, so the colors come out more saturated and rich, which fills a lot of what, I'm kind of going for with my kind of digital aesthetics.
Liz Adam wants to know, do you have assistants that help you with the threading?
There has been times, and there's times I'm doing it by myself. It kind of depends on, if there's, feast or famine. And as an artist, sometimes you're doing really well and things are selling and I can afford to have assistants. And then there's other times where, okay, we're just gonna do it ourselves and make it work. And which is also good because I know all the ins and outs of everything. And so I've done it myself many times. But it's always nice to, and I've lately I've been learning that there's a lot of students from universities that have access, that are, working on this kind of loom, and they want more access to it. So lately I've been kind of utilizing uh some students that can come in, and they're happy to learn and to be a part of the process.
Oh, I bet. I bet. Melody Usher wants to know, how did you get the beautiful color gradations in the weft?
Well, it's really a manual process of kind of counting counting the threads, where, since I'll have, maybe, say I'm going from like a a a dark green, a green to a blue, and so there's, three greens, one blue, three greens, one blue, two greens, one blue, one green, one blue, two blues, one green, and so it's just it's counting. It's
Hmm.
so manual. So the opposite of digital, which is just kind of funny. I'm laughing at myself a lot in the process. But, it's about blending materials. It's almost like you would be blending paint, but, you're just blending your threads.
Mary Holm wants to know what are the dates of the exhibit at the church in Cambridge?
I think it opens on March
Yeah, I
8th.
think you said March. March 8th?
March 9th, I
9th.
think, is when it opens.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it
And
was called what?
it's called Interlaced.
Interlace.
Hmm.
All right. Um, Mary Burns wants to know what reef structures are you using when you're weaving? What are your favorites?
Mm, that's a good question. So yeah, one of the fun things about the jacquard loom is since the all the heddles operate individually, I could work with different weave structures at the same time.
Hmm.
And that's something you can't do on, like a harness loom. So a lot of the times I'm working with damasks or different uh shaded satins, because I'm wanting gradients and just, one color to come to the surface, and another color in a different part of the piece, but in like places where I'm working with like the spray brushes and stuff, that's why I'm
Hmm.
working with the shades of the satin, so I can kind of create those types of fades and blends within the weft yarns. Occasionally, I'll work with some kind of, more decorative weave structures of the diamond shapes, or I don't even know if they have names. Different different more patterned weave structures to kind of just add some shapes in there. I think there was one slide that had a piece that I kind of even like enlarged weave structure, and then actually, so it was really just the design of the weave structure was part of the piece, but then it was actually woven in with satin,
Oh,
with just shaded satins, but it was like in a kind of enlarged weave structure, um, that involved, I think, some checkers and some stuff. So yeah.
Kathy Wilcock wants to know, do you use butterflies or shuttles when you're inserting different colors in the same pick, horizontal pick?
A combination. Mostly I'm using shuttles for the main colors, but then sometimes for if I'm just inserting little chunks of things, sometimes I'm just using my hand, but I could occasionally use a butterfly if I'm going to use one material over and over a couple times within the piece. So yeah, it's kind of wild. I've got a lot of things going on.
Well, those jacquard looms are just a distance from the process, right? So yeah, right. Well, thank you. Liz Adams says, thank you for a great presentation. I love how fearless Robin is, so energetic in her vision. So there you go. Thank you so much. Thanks, Liz. We do want to thank you for being here today. It's been wonderful just hearing everything that's going on with your work and how you do it. And again, I do appreciate your enthusiasm about it too. Um, I told Robin that she's one of these people I could have done 3 more hours with because there's so much we have not talked about that Robin's been involved in, and oh, we could talk about your travels for another hour, but there's only so many hours in the day. But thank you so much for being here, Robin. I encourage you all to go to her website, robinkang.org, and check out some of her work and the things that she's talking about and working on. It's wonderful. Are your exhibits on your website by chance?
Um, they should be.
Okay,
Definitely my
good.
Instagram. I would say that's probably more where I like highlight kind of
Okay.
more PR things. And so my Instagram, if you search my name, Robin Kang, I come
Uh-huh.
up, my actual handle is Spider Woman 1S0S, ones and zeros for this binary stuff that I'm
Love that.
doing. But if you search my name, it'll come up to the top too. So yeah, that's probably like the most recent news, all of that you can get on Instagram.
Well, thank you so much. Y'all check it out. She's got some wonderful stuff going on and you'll love seeing it. So thanks again, Robin. We appreciate it. We also want to say how much we appreciate our sponsor, San Antonio Handweavers Guild. They've, like I said, they're one of my guild angels. They've been sponsoring several episodes. Thank you, San Antonio. We appreciate it. If you would like to sponsor an episode of Textiles and Tea, or your guild, or your business, or a bunch of you want to get together and do one, please feel free. You can go online to weavespindye.org and purchase a sponsorship. If you have questions, give us a call. We'll be glad to help you with that. We've got some more events coming on. If you're thinking about what am I going to do this summer? So many conferences, so many places to go. Here's a chance to get a little bit more information. Travel and Workshop is in the magazine, the next magazine coming out, Shuttle Spindle and Die Pot. We've got our advertiser. We'll have their ads in there. You can learn about dates of conferences, tours, upcoming events. And then we have Travel and Workshop Live. And this is an opportunity for our advertisers to come on Zoom and talk more and give you more detail and also images. Oh my gosh, some of the videos they show are beautiful and give you an idea about upcoming events. You can ask questions and help you plan what you want to do this year for your fiber vacation, something like that. So think about what you want to do this summer. Watch Travel and Workshop. It'll help you decide what's going to be part of your agenda this year. It is February the 20th, and be sure you check that out. It's 1 o'clock Eastern time, and it's free to anybody who wants to watch. We want to thank everybody who has supported Handweavers Guild of America, either through your membership or by donating. When you do that, you support all of these events that have been going on, whether it's Textiles and Tea, whether it's Careers in Textiles, the Guild Retreat. All of those events happen when you are donating to the Guild, and we do appreciate it because we want to see what else we're going to do next. How can we support the weavers out there? And that's our goal. And you help us do that. So thank you all so much. If you want to join or donate, please go to our website at weavespindye.org. And thank you again. If you've missed any episodes, you can watch them either on the HGA Facebook page or you can go to YouTube. And if you like watching them on YouTube, be sure you subscribe because when you do, then you'll get a notice that a new one's been uploaded. And I do want to say something about the last 3 episodes, which is one of the things I love about weaving and I love about our show is that we did an episode with a TC2 artist. Then we did an episode with a woman who weaves on a little square. And then we went back to TC2. Doesn't that kind of encompass all of what weaving's about? It's at each end of the continuum. You can get as complicated and you can get as simple as you like. And they're both just wonderful kind of weavings. I just thought that was kind of a cool serendipity that happened over the last 3 weeks. If you didn't see the other ones, go back and watch them. They're really neat to watch. So thank you all so much. I want to say, oh, next week, yes, we've got Crystal Gregory. She is an instructor at the University of Kentucky. We're excited to have her. And I want to say happy Valentine's Day to everybody. That's this week. I wore my special Valentine's shirt just for you all. Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you so much. Hope you all have a wonderful week and happy tea.